It's the Harv and Jace show. Booming in my ears that whole time.
Oh, no way.
Just ace.
Just boom.
Like the Lord speaking to me.
Lord. Is that you?
I better take this off.
I know, I gotta turn this down a little bit because it can crack a little bit. Ooh, here we go.
Here we go.
Hey.
Sago.
Is that better?
That's ace.
That's like perfect.
Okay.
All right.
Crystal clear.
Crystal. Here we are with the Harv and Jace show. We're sitting here with the one and only Autumn Peltier
and her mom.
And her mama. Hey guys.
Sago.
Thank you so much for doing this. Coming from, you guys are in Wikwemacong right now?
No, we're actually in Ottawa. We live here in Ottawa, but we're from Wikwemacong.
Nice. Awesome. Well, we're coming from Six Nations.
Yes.
Have you guys ever been out this way?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Beautiful. The powwows maybe in Toronto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Autumn Peltier is an advocate for the universal right to clean water, raising awareness towards water rights and ensuring communities have access to clean, safe, and reliable water.
Yes.
She has been named to BBC's Top 100 Women in 2019, Maclean's list of 20 to watch in 2020, and she was Chatelain's Woman of the Year.
Yeah, she's a real mover and a shaker and a real, true inspirational role model for the youth. Right. Not just Indigenous, but all youth in general.
Yeah, so thank you for being on our show.
And it's an honor meeting and talking to you.
We were actually nervous before the interview, right? We've been doing a lot of interviews lately, and like, oh man, we kind of kicked in. We get to chat with Autumn Peltier, and we watch you, and we're so inspired by you, and like all you do all over the world is like what you're doing for Indigenous people, and not only Indigenous people, like all people are benefactors of water, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So you grew up in Wikwemacong. I love the stories that I read about you, but I read that at age 8, you started to attend water ceremonies. Like, can you explain a little bit about where that like desire and to come came from at such an early age?
Well, pretty much I was raised in like a traditional lifestyle, being taught by my Auntie Josephine and my mom, and so I was kind of surrounded by that, and that was like my mentor. That it was my mentor, and pretty much I was attending a water ceremony in a First Nations community when I was 8 years old, and I ended up having to use the washroom, and me being someone who's used to being able to use the washroom, wash my hands, and have no issues with that. And as I was going to the washroom, all over the walls it said, "Do not drink the water, not for consumption, boil water advisory." And at the time, I'm 8 years old. I have no idea what that means. And so I asked my mom, like, why can't we use the water here? Like, why can't I wash my hands with the water in the washroom? And then she explained to me what all of it meant and what a boil water advisory was, and that the First Nations community, specific First Nations community, has been in a boil water advisory for over 20 years.
Wow.
And so I know I was only 8 years old, so I personally don't even like know the actual reason behind why it mattered so much to me at the time. But I guess it was kind of the fact and the thought that there was children that were younger than me and my age that had no idea what it's like to drink from the water from the tap, or wash their hands with the water from the tap. And so that was kind of like my drive to the work that I do. And after that, I started public speaking at my school when I was about 9 years old at native language speaking contests. And so that's kind of where my work really generated from.
Man, that's amazing. I can kind of understand a little bit because I've been to Manitoulin Island. It's like surrounded by Georgian Bay and Lake Huron.
Yeah.
But it's all around you, so it's probably a good reason why you're connected to it so much, right? Like where you're raised.
The community that I was in was only an hour and a half away from my community, and so that's why I guess it kind of struck me, because it's so close to where I am, and something like that happening to my community would honestly be very devastating. So that was really my strive to stand up for my people, because water is a basic human right, and nobody should have to go without clean drinking water, especially for over 20 years. So Yeah.
That's amazing.
Right. Yeah, we've had a water boil advisory here for at least 20 years now. Like, I can't remember the last time I drank from the taps and from the reserve down here.
Right. And that's just awful. And that's when people talk about a lot of times, you know, they're trying to say, oh, why aren't indigenous people? They're like, we're all equal and stuff. And I'm saying, well, you know, that's a big statement because until we have like housing and like basic needs of water and
basic
heat
social
and,
infrastructure,
you know, and food, like then we're not equal, right? Like, and a lot of people don't understand that point, you know. I want to talk a little bit about, do you have any family, like brothers and sisters? And
Yeah, I have a younger sister and an older sister.
oh, that's great. And what do they think about you traveling all over the world?
Well, my older sister's kind of like, she has her own life now because she's grown up. She's 23, and so she's not really around as much as my younger sister. But my younger sister gets to travel with us sometimes, and when she does, she's usually the person who's like controlling my PowerPoints or helping me get ready. So she does have kind of an important part in my work.
Awesome. It's a family affair.
No, I love that. I'm the same way. I grew up like in music with my brothers and stuff. So my mom was doing like all the stuff, and I'm sure your mom is a big part of your success and handling all those logistics, eh? What do you think, Mom? Like, is that a fun job?
It's pretty busy. It's very busy, and the emails, the requests never stop. Like, it's 24/7.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what time of day, how like people from all over the world, I'll get if I don't turn my do not disturb on, a ping will wake me up in the middle of the night, and I'll be like, oh my goodness, who is this? And you know, it's busy. And so my role is basically to make sure, you know, her schedule aligns with her school and her own time, like her to be her.
Right.
And that's pretty important. And also, you know, I do a lot of the editing and the researching. Amazing. And all that kind of the background work. And I'm also the security.
Of course.
Awesome. Yeah. Head of security. Yeah. Mama Bear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't mess with Mama Bear.
Small but mighty. Yeah.
Yes.
And
so it's a lot of work.
Yeah. What do you when you're not out there advocating? What do you do for your downtime, like for fun?
Well, I'm pretty busy with school, so I kind of like I'm doing school all week, and then I have homework on the weekend, so it's kind of like really consistent school, especially in the time we're in with COVID. And it's my schooling's become a lot more busier. And if I'm not doing school, I'm doing interviews or doing conferences, and you know, it's just. I'm very busy.
Busy. Yeah.
She likes TikTok.
Right. Are there like just out there indigenous people that like you look to or are inspired by? That would be great to know.
I do have a few kind of like indigenous people I do look up to, like Johannes Manuel. She's an advocate for the pipelines.
Yes.
And she's someone I look up to. And even Buffy St. Marie, I look up to her too.
Nice.
And Wab Canoe, he's an MP for, I think, Manitoba. Yeah, like I do have a lot of indigenous mentors that I look up to.
That's awesome. I actually got to meet Canahoose in Standing Rock when I went out there years back. That's when I actually heard of you, was when I was out in Standing Rock. Your name
I was out in Standing Rock. I didn't bring her though.
No, maybe we ran into each other out there.
Right.
Yeah, we might have. Yeah,
it was a big camp.
Right.
It was.
What is this like? A lot of people, one of their biggest fears, like they say that there's the top two is like the is public speaking, right?
Yes.
And they say that a lot of people are more scared of public speaking than they are of like death. You know what I mean? So
right.
So like for you, like especially at such a young age, you're such a great orator. Like you're passionate and you're so well spoken. Like where does that come from? Like where do you feel like? Do you feel spiritually connected to this?
Yeah, public speaking was honestly a really hard thing for me to kind of like overcome at such a young age, because I think I was 8 or 9 years old when I said my first speech about the environment and clean drinking water.
Wow.
A few times I almost my first 2 years of public speaking, because I was 9 years old when I first spoke on a large platform at the Children's Climate Conference in Södertälje, Sweden. And it was 64 children from 22 different countries, and we're speaking to the United Nations world leaders. And I almost backed out of that too. I started crying before my first big speech. And then after I got back from Sweden, I was speaking at the Assembly First Nations. And even then, I was still super scared of public speaking. So it's definitely something I've had to overcome. But now it's like I don't get nervous, and I can speak to the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and I don't feel anything but passion when I'm speaking.
That's awesome.
It's more just from my heart now.
You can see it when you watch the videos or hear you speaking. You can tell you're speaking from the heart, and you know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see the President Joe Biden canceled the Keystone pipeline?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. We saw that.
That's huge.
Awesome.
What a great day. I mean, that's why it's just so important that these land protectors and water protectors, because we're dealing with an issue right now with land back lane, which is right close to Six Nations. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that, but they're trying to build and encroach again on Six Nations land. So we've been there for like
6 months.
6 months now, yeah, and they're still under threat from OPP and all this crazy stuff. But protecting the water, like, why is it so important to do what you're doing? Because you're basically giving up like your childhood, like you said, you're probably not doing things that normal 8-year-olds and stuff are doing. So like, can you tell us a little bit about that?
I almost felt like it was almost like my responsibility to start doing this, because my auntie Josephine, I think I mentioned before, was already doing this work before me, and I like seeing her already doing this work and then watching her age and get older and become more weak and unable to do this work and travel. I thought to myself, well, who's going to carry on this work? Like, if once she passes away, is there just going to be nobody that's going to be talking about this issue anymore? And so I said, I can't just let this go. I had to stand up and I had to speak on her behalf, and now I'm following in her footsteps. And even before she passed away, a little over a year ago now, she told me to keep on doing this work and don't let anybody stop me. So those words, every time I feel like giving up and I feel like it's getting really hard, like that's all I hear, and I physically can't. And that's just kind of like the emotional part as to why I do this. But more into like the reason why I do it is more like I mentioned, like the thought of knowing that there's First Nations communities that have been on boil water advisories for over 20 years. It's just, why are First Nations people in Canada and North America treated so badly? Like, we're just as normal as everybody else. Like, I don't like to use the word normal, but that's like, we're no different. Like, I don't understand why we have to be treated so badly. And especially the northern Ontario communities, the northern communities, especially the ones that are isolated, and they have like, you can't even drive to them, you have to fly. They're very isolated, and especially in a time like right now, because we're in coronavirus, they're dependent on bottled water, and they barely have simple sanitization. And it's honestly crazy to think that even Justin Trudeau, he says, I'm going to resolve all the boil water advisories by 2021, and he hasn't accomplished that. And so why make a promise if you can't keep it? And considering how long our First Nations people have been suffering in Canada, why do we have to wait so much more longer? It's just a constant issue that like you have to keep pushing for, because every time you get two steps forward, you're one step back. It's almost like it's never going to be resolved. So
right, that's a great point that you're saying. Like, it is a lot of work, and Indigenous people have been fighting for these rights for hundreds and hundreds of years. Actually, right since contact, we've been fighting for ourselves. I mean, that must take a bit of a mental toll on you. And you're such a young person, and like, how do you deal with the mental, like to keep yourself balanced and focused, and not like getting in your head too much,
Yeah, well, it does become pretty overwhelming at times, especially with like social media and like the social media attention. This role does become very overwhelming at times because mainly only because of social media. It's definitely a big role, but I just have to keep remembering like why I'm doing my work, and like just keep reminding myself what my auntie Josephine said, and I like. At first, my motivation was, well, what if I don't do it, who's going to do it now? But the progress I've seen over time, and how much more people are standing up, not only First Nation Indigenous peoples, it's all people. More people are becoming aware of this issue because it wasn't talked about before. This was almost like a silent issue. Nobody was talking about it. But now the progress I've seen since I started doing my work is so much better. And it does give me a little bit of hope because before, like I said, it wasn't talked about, but now you see more people, not only Indigenous, but it's everybody. So I do have a little bit more hope than I did when I started.
That's awesome. Well, you're like a rock star in the industry, so to speak.
Yeah, you're royalty. You're our Indigenous royalty.
Yeah.
And now we're talking with Derek Miller about that. He was saying that all Indigenous people are Indigenous royalty too, because we're allies to the crown, right? Like we're not subjects. Yeah, so it's a great way to look at it too, eh?
We wrote the crown.
Yeah.
I don't know if the crown would. I don't know if the crown would agree with that though, because we wrote to the Queen once, and we got a letter back, and they said contact the Governor General of Canada.
They have to go
and
through.
I was like,
Wow.
Passing the ball back and forth as usual.
yeah.
Have you felt any like opposition? There's got to be people who. I'm not really sure if there are people out there that would.
They'd have to be some terrible,
troll
terrible
you
people.
Or just bring, try to shut down what you're doing.
Yeah, I've been through actually several situations where people try to. I've been in a lot of situations that include slander and defamation of character, and it's definitely something that does become very stressful. And it's not only kids, like it's adults, it's everyone, and it's almost like it's an unstoppable situation. But I've never really understood it because the way I look at my work is good work, because I'm working hard for my people because we're so underlooked. And it's just, I never seen why people would have any reason to hate against this type of work. This is advocacy for a good cause. It's nothing bad. And I've never seen a reason for people to be against this.
I think it would come down to money, right?
Yeah, and
Right.
and that's part of
Corporations, maybe.
And that's part of my role. And that's part of my role too, as her mom. Like I'm usually, I have a little team of family who we constantly troll the social media, looking for things and blocking things, deleting things, and not responding. So we have it's a little family thing where that's where the older sister and her roommates come in. I'm like, okay, we have one. Check it out. And and so they'll look at everything, and the young people are so quick with social media, and they're like, okay, we got it. Everything's gone. I'm like, okay, so but those are the kinds of things.
They almost look for anything at this point.
Yeah, they'll
make you look bad.
Anything. You can wear something and they'll make fun. They'll sometimes make fun of what she's wearing, like her traditional things. And that just, that irks me too. Or she's just the kid. Like, what is she doing up there? Look at these politicians. They're just using her and, stuff like that. Like I try to delete all those and I, block them and delete. So it's a pretty busy job that I have. And, there's just some things she doesn't need to know, something she doesn't need to see. And then I'll report back to leadership and let them know what's going on. So yeah, there's a big team out there trying to help her out.
Well, pay no mind to the trolls, because what you're doing is wonderful work.
Right.
And I applaud everything you're doing. That's great.
Awesome. In 2016, you met with Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, and let him know that you were really unhappy with some of his choices, specifically the lack of safe drinking water on reserves and the support for the pipeline. How brave of you to kind of a lot of people in that situation would probably just put on a smile and, just get through it, but you couldn't resist. You had to be yourself.
Well, I was 12 years old, and I guess you could say I've always been kind of radical, because I get it from my mom.
Ace.
And I honestly don't know, because in that time I was told not to say anything to him actually, and just give him the gift and walk away and smile. That's what I was told to do. And as I was walking up there, I didn't know I was going to say that, but in that moment I thought about how this is my chance to say something to the Prime Minister of Canada. I'm face to face with him. I need to say something. This is who I need to express my feelings to. And so as I was about to hand him the gift, he reached in for it, and I pulled back, and I said, "I'm very unhappy with the choices you've made and broken promises to my people." And then he said, "I understand that." And I started crying.
Wow.
And I said, all that came out after I started crying was the pipelines, because in that time, I'm pretty sure that was the Kinder Morgan pipeline that was going through, I think, at the time. And yeah, so pretty much I started crying. And then he said, I will protect the water. And so he made a promise to me that I'm obviously going to hold accountable to him for the rest of the remainder of the time I'm doing my work, because especially to a 12-year-old, that's a big promise to make to someone who's 12 years old.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That was a powerful moment. I watched the footage, and it was powerful stuff.
Right. We see the power of people standing up for the land, because we just seen the Keystone pipeline go down. If it wasn't for people protesting it would went through, right? It'd be,
right.
You know, so that resistance, like
Rainy Wachoni.
the young generation, I know, is it important to you that you like inspire these young people?
Well, actually, my favorite types of audience to speak to are people and kids that are younger than me, because like you said, it's the next generation. And right now it's our generation right now, well, my generation that's standing up. You see the majority of people standing up are their youth, and it's honestly very empowering to see, because you didn't see a lot of that when I started, but now the more that like the issue of climate change, water, and several different types of things are becoming more aware and talked about, you see a lot more people standing up because it's being talked about, becoming more aware of. And so I honestly feel like the younger generation is definitely the ones you need to inspire and mentor, because they're the future leaders of tomorrow. And like I honestly feel like the youth are the ones that are giving everybody hope, because I feel like we're gonna fix things. So we need to keep on inspiring and mentoring the youth.
I know exactly what you mean, because everywhere I look all over the world, like in sports and business, there is like literally 12-year-old, 13-year-olds like dominating in sports and dominating in business. And like, I know exactly what you mean. And that's a good thing, because I think the old guard, like the old colonial ways of thinking, you know, the old mentality of hierarchy and all that stuff, I think that needs to, you know, pass on with that older generation. You know, like what is a future, a perfect future in your eyes for Indigenous people that you want to see like over your lifetime?
Well, what I want to see and why I do my work is to hopefully find, if not resolve all of the boil water advisories in First Nations communities, the drinking water issues, at least find a solution to be able to minimize the amount that there is and be able to hold the number at a stable kind of like area, so it is not increasing and there's not as many as there is now. And yeah, I just hope to see a lot more improvement in First Nations communities, and not only with water, a lot more different things like on terms of racism and systemic racism,
Awesome.
environmental racism. There's so many different fields you need to look at when it comes to Indigenous rights and Indigenous issues in Canada.
How inspiring.
Yes.
You just got me sitting here like my heart is full, because it's so awesome that you're doing that work. I just want to commend you, but there must be like opportunities to do, like, have you ever thought about doing like a book or, you know, kinds of things like that?
Yeah, there's actually been a few people that have contacted me about helping me write a book or writing a book about my story. Even my mom was considering writing her own book about my story.
Do it, Mama.
Do
I
it.
started. I started, and then I kind of started, and I got a few chapters in, and then I kind of got busy. So
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
keep at it.
Yep, keep at it. We would love it.
Yeah.
But I know that you are a part of a new documentary, Water Walker, that's coming out. That was produced by a good friend of ours and the Harv and Jace show, Stevie Salas.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
It's not available to the general public yet, and if you contact Graham Greene, he probably has a copy of it. And
We need him. He's from Six Nations.
yeah, because he's a big part of it as well. And but I do have a copy, and I'll just ask Stevie if I can share it with you.
Yeah,
That'd be ace.
that would be amazing. We could review it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he would he let me share it with somebody else. He just said not to show it out in the public
Of
yet
course.
because it's only being shown at the film festivals right now.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Can you tell us a bit about that process of creating that?
Well, that was probably one of like the most fun parts of my work so far, was being able to create this documentary. Because we were contacted by Stevie Salis, I'm pretty sure. Stevie Salis, yeah. And he was inquiring about making a documentary about my work and my story. And we've never had anything done like that before. So we, of course, like took the opportunity because we had a feeling this was going to turn out really good. And it did. When we first started the documentary, it was a few days before my birthday and a few days before I spoke at the United Nations. And so I ended up being in New York City for a week. And the majority of the documentary is filmed actually in New York City, which was
amazing.
The coolest part about it. Like, that was the coolest part about it. And it's just, the documentary was so well put together, and the story, it's just, like, I've never looked at my story like that until I seen it, almost like it was a movie. And it felt really good to watch. And for even me, even though it's me, it was very empowering to me. So it's like, they really made it look good. And yeah, it's really good. I do recommend watching it. Yeah.
So are you going to do like any, I guess because of COVID now, you won't be able to do all the red carpets and all that fun stuff. Man, that's disappointing, eh?
Yeah. Zoom red carpets.
You have to do a Zoom red carpet, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, can you talk a little bit about the speech that you gave at the UN?
Well, my first speech that I said at the United Nations, I was 13 years old, and it was on World Water Day. And that, I was a little bit nervous for that one because this was it was 173 world leaders at the General Assembly.
Wow.
And I was speaking, and the president of the General Assembly was sitting right behind me as I was speaking, so that was pretty nerve-wracking. And I kind of called him out a little bit too. So I was a little nervous considering he was behind me, but I felt so good about it because I just couldn't stop thinking about the fact that I brought my people's awareness to the United Nations. I brought it as far as the United Nations, and that was like, it was such a good feeling. Like, I felt like in that moment my work paid off. Like, what I was working so hard for paid off. And I keep getting invited to the United Nations, so it's like they like what I'm saying, and I can't deny that because it's world leaders, and they want to hear my message. I'm finally able to share my message on a global platform. And not only the United Nations, I spoke at the World Economic Forum too.
Right.
Last January in Davos, Switzerland, and even then the platform was also a huge platform. And I didn't even know when I was saying that speech that the Prince of Wales, I think, was watching my speech. I didn't know.
And there was a king?
There was even a king that was watching my speech, and
Wow.
I didn't even know. And I think also that one was a very impactful speech that I gave in there. And it's just, as far as I brought my work, it just gives me so much hope, and it makes me feel so proud that I've been able to bring such something that was so like not looked at, underlooked, is now one of it's talked about a lot more.
Yeah. That's
put Indigenous people on the map.
Yes, and that's what it's all about. The Indigenous Rise, right? We're climbing like judges, Supreme Courts, and music and business. So Indigenous people are really just taking over a lot of industries, and it's so awesome to see, and it's about time.
Right, land back everywhere.
Right.
Like, even then, what's it called? After, like, because during that speech, I called out the Canadian federal government. And I feel like that's where a lot of change started to happen because I called them out. That was what was all over the Canadian news,
right?
All of the European news, is that I called out the Canadian federal government. And after that, I started to see a little bit more change. So I think I made kind of a large impact then.
Your voice
Right.
is, it reaches so many people, like you said, like when you speak, like literally news from all around the world will take it and cover it, like and you have like hundreds of thousands of followers too on your social media and stuff like that. That's got to be a little bit of weighty responsibility, you know?
Yeah, it is something that is also again very overwhelming because you need to be very careful with what you say
Right.
because like like we said before, they'll take anything to make you look bad.
Wow.
Right.
So it's with that big of a platform, you need to be very careful, and it's honestly very it's a little bit scary, even though it's not too much compared to what other advocates and activists have. It's still a large platform you need to be very careful on.
Right.
And do you manage that yourself then? Are you responsible for your own tweets and all that stuff?
No, actually, my mom runs it, and a few of like the people like that kind of like manage my work
Right.
Yeah.
are looking after it and manage it. So
No, that's great.
And we show her everything. Yeah.
So they're Autumn
We
Peltier
show
approved.
her everything, and I'll say, read these messages. Yeah. Yeah.
Screen them. You gotta
Yep.
screen them.
In 2019, Autumn, you were named the chief water commissioner by the Anishinaabe Nation, which was previously held by, like you said, was that your great aunt Josephine?
Yeah.
So you're second generation. Like, what does that entail? Like, what is the water commissioner duties?
Well, the chief water commissioner is kind of like I have a say in decisions that are being made for First Nations communities around
That is awesome.
the Great Lakes, and that's honestly again a very big role I have.
That is a big role.
And it also does feel really good to be able to have a say in what happens in First Nations communities, and I take the concerns, comments, questions from First Nations communities to the decision table and the discussion table. So it's a very interactive job, and yeah, it feels very good to be able to sit in the seat that my Auntie Josephine was and be able to carry on her work and hold the same title as she did.
It's a lot to do with like it's everything. It's the invasive species. It's
right.
groundwater. It's any waters flowing into the Great Lakes or flowing out of the Great Lakes, and it's just being aware of what's happening in the ecosystems and everything. So it's pretty informative, and that committee, it's international, like it goes across the border because it's anyone, like all the organizations and people who have stakes with the water, like the United States as well. So they're sitting at the table too. So it's a pretty like the Minister of Environment is on that at that table as well. So it's a pretty big responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
And all the stuff that you do at the end of the day, when you come home and relax and you're just a teenager, like you said, you just turned 16. Like, what do you do to unwind? Like, do you do, like, you have to do teenager stuff and fight with your sisters and siblings and.
Yeah, well, me and my sister, of course, do fight sometimes. But I have a couple friends that I like to hang out with, and that's like kind of like my downtime. And I'm usually just on my phone or watching TV.
Crime shows.
I love crime shows. I aspire to be a criminal defense lawyer.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Well, it sounds like you're pretty busy other than that. Otherwise, like water commissioner, advocating
Right.
out there, interviews.
How do you like living in Ottawa? Oh, well, what's that like?
It's better. It's definitely, I do feel a little bit of a disconnection though from obviously where I was living before on Manitoulin Island, and but I just know here I do have a lot more opportunities, and I don't have to travel so far to an airport anymore when I'm traveling, because before I was driving 2 hours every time I traveled to go to an airport, but now I live 15 minutes away and I can Uber to the airport.
Right.
So it definitely comes with a lot of different advantages, closer to universities as well, so I don't have to move so far away from my new home. So yeah.
Well, so that's what your next step is. You're planning on going to university. Is that the goal to become like what is the goal that we're there?
Well, I do have two goals right now, and I'm kind of deciding which one I really want to choose. I do just want to go to either Carleton University or Ottawa, the University of Ottawa,
Nice.
here in Ottawa. But one of my goals is to become a criminal defense lawyer, and like I mentioned, I love crime shows.
Wow.
I love homicide shows. I wanna become a lawyer. But if I decide to put my career on a different path, I want to become a politician or become a lawyer for a human rights lawyer.
Yes.
I want to do something
Prime
in
Minister.
the law field.
Yeah.
Either way. So, yeah.
You're already in Ottawa. You might as well just take office
Just take Justin's seat, man.
Yeah.
Well, just go give them an eviction notice.
That's
Yeah,
right.
sounds good. We got some flags you can borrow if you need them.
Some
Yeah.
parting gifts. Yeah. Some parting gifts, some KD and wieners, and you gotta leave.
Yeah. You out of here.
Yeah, that's really cool. Autumn, are there some issues right now that are troubling you, or things that could be coming up now that we need to be like watching for, and you know?
I do have two issues that I do actually feel very strongly about, that are other than my water advocacy, and those are racism against Indigenous people.
Wow.
And missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Yeah, those are big too.
Yeah, those are huge.
Yeah.
And what kinds of things, like for people who don't really know what to do, because a lot of people don't really know how they can help, you know, like is there any kind of advice that you would give people that want to become a little more conscious,
involved, active, I guess, in the
you know,
advocacy?
I feel like when it comes to racism against Indigenous people, it's not really studying that the Indigenous people have to do in Canada. It's more of the non-Native people.
Right.
Because a big part of it is stereotypes. And of course, us First Nations people, we know the truth about the stereotypes, and we know that the majority of the time it's false. And even here, when I first moved here to Ottawa, my first year of high school, they asked me what my ethnicity was, what my race was, and I mentioned that I was First Nation. And the comments that I got were not flattering.
Man,
they weren't
that's
nice.
awful.
I was asked if my parents were drug addicts or alcoholics, or if I was poor, or if I lived in a teepee. Like those are stereotypes that for some reason have been around for a long time and don't seem to be going away. And that's not only is it a stereotype, it's racism. And when it comes, like, even racism does connect to the water issue, because it's
Wow.
environmental racism, because people are being so poorly treated. Like, why is it that in a first world country, Canada, we're known as a rich country? Why is it that there's First Nations people living in third world countries? Why are we so poorly treated in a rich country? Why are we living in such poor conditions? And it doesn't seem to make sense. And we are literally the first peoples of this land, and we should almost be like people that people have a high respect for, but we're not. Like, I don't know what it is, but I feel that non-Native people need to become more educated on this type of issue. And missing and murdered Indigenous women, that one it never sat right with me. It still doesn't. And if I do go into criminal defense, what I want to do is specialize in missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Awesome.
So that's it's just something I feel like I would be willing to give up the rest of my life for.
Well, I think anything you set your mind to, you can do. And like, you're proof of that.
On top of like the missing and murdered Indigenous women one, that one always never sat right with me, because me as an Indigenous woman and my younger sister and my older sister, it's just, I can't imagine what it's like for those families that have lost people in their family. And then again, it's not only missing and murdered, it's not only women, it's men too. It's not only women. And that's especially what's not talked about. And it's something that I would be willing to, like I said, give up the rest of my life for. And it's something that definitely needs to be talked about, and that needs to be resolved and looked at more. So, yeah.
We're so excited and honored that you joined us, had time for us. And I'm so glad that it worked out like the internet worked out, because it was a little choppy. I was a little scared.
Yeah.
But we're like, we can't thank you enough. And you, Mom, you got back to us so quick. Like, we're just so honored that you guys would do this for us. An Indigenous show that's written by Indigenous people for Indigenous people. And we're just so thrilled that you're here.
Yeah. And anytime you want to come back and shoot the breeze, we're here to shoot the breeze.
Definitely. We would love for you guys to come back, you know, just keep doing what you're doing. We just support you. Six Nations supports you. And we would love you guys to come down and tour. And if you do, make sure you shoot us a message, and we'll make sure you get treated really well when you come around this place, okay?
Yeah. Miigwech.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Awesome.
Ona gawahi.
Ona gawahi. Bye, guys.
It's the Harv and Jace show.